Under the ocean, there are nuclear submarines that are almost invisible to anyone.
Oh.
They move quietly while carrying some of the most powerful weapons ever made by man. And what's even more surprising is that they have the ability to stay underwater for several months without surfacing. While most subs need to return to the surface to get air or fuel, nuclear submarines are different because it can stay underwater for a very long time since it produces its own air. It has a system that uses seawater to produce oxygen, and this process is called electrolysis. Simply put, electricity separates the water to obtain the oxygen that the crew breathes. Oxygen is what people inside use to breathe. Meanwhile, the hydrogen that is produced in the process is released outside the submarine because it easily ignites when it accumulates. This entire system is powered by the submarine's nuclear reactor. Because of this, lack of electricity is not a problem, and they can keep producing air whether it's day or night. But oxygen isn't the only problem inside the submarine. When we breathe, we release carbon dioxide, or CO2. If this builds up in a closed space, it can become dangerous. That's why there are special filters and chemical systems inside the submarine that absorb CO2 to keep the air safe. Even smoke from cooking, chemical odors, and other impurities in the air are also filtered out by the filtration systems. In other words, almost everything a person needs to survive is produced right inside the submarine. The air here is artificial. The water comes from a desalination process where seawater is turned into drinking water, and the entire submarine is powered by nuclear energy. But the question is, when can a submarine surface? According to reports from the U.S. Navy and other military sources, the only major reason why a submarine surfaces is because the crew is running out of food. This means that if they have enough food, they can stay underwater for a very long time. And this is where things get even scarier, because the true heart of a nuclear submarine is its reactor. Inside it, there's a compact nuclear reactor that's almost the size of a small room. But even though it's that small, it can produce a huge amount of energy. According to military and nuclear engineering reports, modern nuclear submarines like America's Virginia class use reactors that can last for more than 20 to 30 years without being refueled. This means that throughout the entire lifespan of the submarine, it may not be necessary to replace its nuclear fuel. This is very different compared to an ordinary ship that always needs fuel. This reactor is what produces heat. Afterwards, this heat is used to produce steam or very hot vapor that turns the turbines of the submarine. The turbines are what power the entire ship and provide electricity to all the systems. And because it's nuclear powered, it doesn't need to draw air from the surface like diesel submarines. Diesel submarines need to surface sometimes to run their engines and charge their batteries. And when they surface, it's easier for the enemy to spot them. But a nuclear submarine can stay hidden underwater for a very long time. It's quiet, hard to find, and almost invisible. And the power of nuclear fuel is even more surprising. But why? According to nuclear energy studies, a small amount of enriched uranium has energy equivalent to a huge amount of ordinary fuel like coal or oil. That's why even if the submarine's reactor core is small, it's enough to power the entire ship for many years. But the most dangerous part of nuclear submarines is not just how long they can stay underwater, but the weapons they carry. Some submarines, especially ballistic missile submarines, carry nuclear missiles that can hit targets from extremely long distances. For example, according to the U.S. Navy and defense reports, America's Ohio-class submarines have the capability to carry Trident missiles with nuclear warheads. And each warhead is many times more powerful than the atomic bomb used in Hiroshima during the World War II. In simple terms, a single submarine can carry enough nuclear weapons to cause massive destruction to many cities. And what's even more frightening is that while most people go about their normal daily lives on the surface, there are nuclear submarines silently patrolling beneath the ocean right now. We can't see them, we don't know where they are, but they're just there, silently standing guard beneath the sea while carrying some of the most dangerous weapons in the world. But wait, before we continue, I just want to ask for a like and please subscribe as well. This will help us content creators. Thank you. And now let's get back to it. In fact, it's not only America that has this kind of submarine. For those who don't know, in the world of nuclear weapons, there's a reason why big countries are afraid to start a war. Because they know that if they attack, there will immediately be a counterattack against them. That's why nuclear weapons are important. For example, if China attacks using their land-based bases, America can destroy their cities using submarines. It's harder to find submarines compared to missile bases on land. Missile bases can be seen by satellites, so the enemy knows where they are. But submarines are hidden under the sea. They could be in the Atlantic Ocean, they could be in the Pacific Ocean, or in the Arctic. And because the enemy doesn't know where they are, they're always cautious. And sometimes, even the enemy with the most modern intelligence system isn't sure exactly where it's hiding. That's why for major nuclear powers, the submarine is the hardest to take down. According to the U.S. Navy, the Trident II D5 missile is used on America's Ohio-class submarines and on the United Kingdom's Vanguard-class submarines. This missile is designed for strategic nuclear deterrence, which means it's not an ordinary weapon. It's there to prevent the enemy from starting a nuclear war. The United Kingdom, according to the official statement of their government, has a policy called the Continuous At-Sea Deterrent. Since 1969, they've made sure that there's always one nuclear-armed submarine at sea. This means that even when everything seems quiet, even when there's no news, even when people's lives above are normal, they have a submarine submerged somewhere, ready to act if there's a serious national emergency. France follows the same logic. According to the French Ministry of Armed Forces, their M51 missile is used to maintain the credibility of their sea-based nuclear deterrent. In other words, they want to show that even if someone attacks them, they still have a way to retaliate from the sea. Russia, China, and India also have their own submarine forces. There's no need to detail every missile and every number because much of this information is classified or constantly changing. But what's clear is that these countries are investing in submarines because they know that the most powerful weapon isn't always the loudest. Sometimes the most powerful weapon is the one you can't see. And that's exactly the job of a nuclear submarine. It doesn't need to show itself. It doesn't need to threaten every day. It's enough that the world knows it's there. Because when the enemy knows there's a submarine that can survive the first attack, it becomes harder for them to start using force. It's just like this. If there are two people both holding very powerful weapons, both of them will think twice before making a move. Because they know that if one strikes first, it doesn't mean they're already safe. There will still be a counterattack. And in nuclear strategy, that's the reason why submarines are so important. They weren't made for everyday use. Instead, they're a country's protection. But while we're talking about the power of weapons, there's a much simpler question. How do the people inside manage to live for a long time underwater? Because no matter how advanced the submarine is, it's still people inside. They still need to eat. They still need to sleep. They still need to work inside a narrow steel vessel while hundreds of meters of water are above them. In fact, even if the submarine is nuclear powered, there's still one thing the reactor can't do. It can't produce food. So in real life, the limitation of a submarine is not electricity. It's not air, it's not water, but food. Before leaving for a mission, the submarine is filled with supplies. Thousands of canned goods, frozen food, dry goods, and other food items are loaded through small hatches. Because space is limited, almost every vacant area is used for storage. There's food beside the hallway. There's food under the bunk beds. There's food in the corners. During the early part of the patrol, sometimes it feels like the crew is walking on top of their own groceries. And this isn't a small group. The crew of a nuclear submarine can be more than 100 people. Every day, they need to be fed breakfast, lunch, dinner, and sometimes there's even a late-night meal for those on night duty. That's why inside the submarine, the kitchen is a big deal. It's not just about food, it's a necessity for them. And when you've gone months without sunlight, without fresh air, without privacy, and seeing almost the same things every day, good food is a big help in keeping the crew calm. That's why in many navies, they take the selection of submarine cooks seriously. They need to cook well even with limited space. They need to plan meals properly, and they need to make sure that important supplies don't run out quickly. At the start of the patrol, fresh fruits and vegetables are eaten first because they spoil faster. Next comes the frozen food. In the latter part of the mission, they eat canned goods and shelf-stable food more often. So as the mission goes on, the menu becomes simpler and more repetitive. But even so, food is still important. Because under the sea, a proper meal is not a luxury. Instead, it's a break. It's comfort. It's a reminder that even though they're inside a steel world, they're still human. But even if the crew is well fed, there's something even more important to the survival of the submarine: silence. Under the sea, noise is like a light in the dark. If you're heard, you can be found. If you're found, you can be followed. And if you're followed, you can become a target. That's why in submarine warfare, real defense isn't the thickness of steel. Real defense is silence. As they say, modern nuclear submarines are built to be extremely quiet. The entire design of a submarine is focused on reducing noise. The propeller or pump jet system is designed so it doesn't easily create vibrations. The machinery inside is fitted with special mounts so that noise doesn't spread throughout the body of the submarine. Even the crew's movements are disciplined. You can't just shout. You can't just bump things around. You can't just make noise, especially when the submarine is in a sensitive area. Because underwater, even the smallest sound can be a clue. And the ocean itself is a noisy place. There are waves, there's rain on the surface, there are whales, there are other ships. There are natural sounds coming from the seafloor. That's why the goal of a submarine is to blend in with the noise of the ocean until it's almost unnoticeable, like a shadow in the dark. It's there, but you can't see it. It's moving, but you can't hear it. And the quieter the submarine is, the more dangerous it becomes. Because the most dangerous enemy is not the one that always shows itself, but the one that's been around for a long time and you'll only find out too late. But submarines weren't this quiet before. During the early years of the Cold War, especially in the 1950s and 1960s, most nuclear submarines were still noisy. The engines had a hum, the turbines vibrated, the spinning propeller made noise, and all those small sounds spread through the water. That was a problem because sound travels very fast in the sea. Underwater, sound travels farther than it does in air. That's why during the Cold War, sonar operators could often hear an approaching submarine from a very long distance. According to older military reports and submarine histories, there were Soviet submarines back then that were much louder compared to modern submarines today. Sometimes experienced sonar operators could even identify what type of submarine was approaching just by the sound of its engine. It's like recognizing a person's voice, but as technology advanced, submarines became even quieter. Now, almost every part of a modern nuclear submarine is designed to reduce noise. The heavy machines inside are not directly attached to the body of the submarine. They are fitted with special shock absorbers and rubber mounts to prevent vibrations from spreading. To put it simply, it's like putting a pillow around the machine so it can't be heard outside. Even the reactor systems are made quieter. Some modern submarines even use cooling systems that rely less on machinery and don't require powerful pumps during normal operation. Because of this, the noise inside is reduced. Even the propeller has been modified. Instead of just an ordinary propeller, many new submarines now use a pump jet system. It's quieter while running. It's harder to hear. It's harder to find. Even the outside of the submarine has a special coating. According to military defense reports, some submarines have rubber-like panels that help absorb sonar waves on the hull. When fewer sonar signals bounce back, it's harder to determine where the submarine is. And that's really their main goal. Not speed, not power, but to remain unseen and unheard. Because in submarine warfare, if the enemy spots you, that's already a big problem. That's why big countries spend billions of dollars just to make their submarines even quieter. And even with today's advanced technology, it's still an extremely difficult military challenge finding a submarine that really doesn't want to be found. But while it's quiet inside the submarine, there's one thing that's surprisingly really important in the daily life of the crew, and that's the food. According to many navies, good food is really a big deal for maintaining the crew's mental well-being. Despite this, even though there's food and a good system inside, submarines still have one big problem that remains difficult to solve until now, and that's communication. When the submarine is underwater, its connection to the surface world is almost completely cut off. And the reason is simple. Radio waves can't easily penetrate seawater. On land, communication using radio is fast, but underwater, that's a different story. The signal quickly weakens when it passes through seawater. That's why a normal military radio is almost useless when the submarine is deep underwater. Because of this, some navies use very low frequency or VLF signals. There are also extremely low frequency or ELF systems. These signals are slower, but they can reach underwater. The problem is the data transmission is extremely slow. To put it simply, it's like having a very slow internet connection. Sometimes it takes several minutes or even longer for a short message to be delivered. And if the command is long or complicated, it's even harder to send. That's why the military developed a special method to send messages to submarines. But its capabilities are very limited. Usually only short-coded messages are sent, not long conversations, not video calls, not real-time communication. Sometimes the submarine only receives a few characters or code words, and each code corresponds to a specific instruction. According to military reports and defense analysts, one of the most important types of messages is the emergency action message. This is the type of coded instruction used for the most serious situations, including possible nuclear launch orders. That's why the entire communication system of nuclear submarines is designed to ensure that the critical message gets through even when they're underwater. But there's a problem. When a submarine wants to send a clearer reply or receive more information, it needs to come closer to the surface. It won't surface completely, but just enough to raise its antenna above the water. When that happens, that's when they receive satellite transmissions and send their response. After that, they quickly submerge again, because the longer they stay near the surface, the higher the chance the enemy will spot them. They can be detected by radar. Surveillance aircraft might notice them. The signal can be tracked. That's why they're careful every time they come close to the surface. Fast, quiet, and carefully planned, because even just a few minutes of exposure is already a big risk for the submarine. But it's not just communication that's difficult underwater. Navigation is too. For normal people, using GPS is easy. You just open your cell phone and you can immediately see where you are. But in a submarine, it's not that simple. GPS doesn't work in deep water because satellite signals can't penetrate seawater properly. So while the submarine is underwater, it doesn't know its exact position using satellites. And just think about how difficult that is. It's dark all around. There are no street signs, no lights, no mountains or buildings to use as reference. There's just water in every direction. So how do they know where they are? It's because of math and extremely sensitive instruments. The main thing submarines use is inertial navigation systems. Simply put, this system measures every movement of the submarine, every turn, every acceleration, every descent or ascent. And from there, it calculates where the submarine is based on its last known location. It's just like this. If you know where you started and you also know how far and how fast you've moved, you can guess where you are now. But as time goes by, the system gradually develops a small error, and the longer the mission, the bigger that error becomes. That's why sometimes the submarine needs to update its position. Sometimes it comes up near the surface to get a GPS signal. At other times, they use sonar to compare the seafloor with seabed maps. It's like matching the real land to a map. All of this is important because the submarine can't lose its bearings. It can't crash into the seafloor. It can't get its location wrong, especially if it's a strategic missile submarine. Because for the missile to hit its target, the submarine needs to know its exact position before launching. And while we're just thinking about that, there's another, even more terrifying enemy under the sea: pressure. As the submarine goes deeper and deeper, the pressure from the surrounding water increases. On the surface of the sea, the pressure is normal. But as you go down, the force pushing on the submarine from all directions increases. And that's not a small force. It's huge. It's like there's something extremely heavy pressing on every part of the ship. That's why the body of the submarine is made with very strong metal. According to defense engineering reports, special high-strength steel is used for the pressure hull of submarines. This is the most important part of the ship. This is what literally blocks the immense pressure of the ocean. Every weld, every piece of steel, every door, every hole that pipes and cables pass through, all of those need to be extremely strong. Because if even a small part fails while the submarine is deep underwater, the result can be catastrophic. If there's a major breach in the hull while the submarine is at great depth, the force of the water rushing in is immense. And according to engineering experts, at this kind of pressure, water can rush in extremely fast and with tremendous force. That's why in submarine engineering, inspections are extremely strict. The steel is checked repeatedly, the welds are inspected, and the hull is tested before it is allowed to be used. Because underwater, even a small defect can become a huge tragedy. In airplanes, sometimes there's still a chance to make an emergency landing if there's a problem. But for a submarine that's in the deepest parts of the ocean, that's a different story. If the hull gives way, sometimes it's just a matter of seconds before the submarine is completely lost. That's why for submariners, the pressure hull is their lifeline. Because as long as it's intact, they have protection against the weight of the entire ocean. But if it fails, that's the end for them. But inside the submarine, it's not just water that the crew fears. Sometimes fire is even more dangerous. It sounds strange because they're under the sea, but when a fire breaks out inside a submarine, it's not just an ordinary fire, it's an enclosed space and the passageways are cramped. There are lots of wires, machines, oil, plastic, and equipment. And most importantly, everyone breathes the same air. When there's a fire, it quickly consumes the oxygen. When there's smoke, it quickly fills the entire compartment. And when there's toxic gas, the air inside can become dangerous in just a few minutes. That's why on a submarine, a fire drill is no joke. Everyone in the crew, from the highest ranking officer to the newest sailor, needs to know how to fight fires. They need to know how to use breathing equipment. They need to know how to seal off a compartment. They need to know how to stop the fire before it spreads. Because underwater, there's no fire truck coming. There's nowhere easy to run. There are no open windows for the smoke to escape. If there's a fire, they're the only ones who have to deal with it. And if they can't stop it right away, the whole submarine could be put in danger. That's how hard life is under the sea. Even if it's quiet outside, there's always a risk inside. And during the Cold War, the world of submarines became even more dangerous. They weren't just patrolling back then. They were watching each other. They were hiding from each other. They were following each other. And sometimes they were so close to each other without the people above knowing. During the time of America and the Soviet Union, a big part of their battle happened under the sea. It wasn't seen on TV. You didn't hear about it on the news. But under the Atlantic, Pacific, and Arctic oceans, there were submarines quietly searching for the enemy. The goal of attack submarines was simple but dangerous. Find the enemy's missile submarine. Follow it without being noticed. Listen to the sound it makes. Learn its movements. And if a nuclear war breaks out, they are the first to try to stop it before any missiles can be launched. That's how difficult it is. The underwater war during the Cold War was tense. One wrong move and someone might hear you. Just one noise from the engine could reveal your position. One wrong turn could bring two submarines dangerously close to each other. And because nuclear weapons are at stake, Every small mistake could escalate. Many of the details of these operations are still classified to this day. That's why many crew members came home from these missions, unable to even tell their families where they went or what they did. They worked quietly under the sea, they kept watch in silence, and they quietly carried the weight of a mission that could decide the fate of many nations. But no matter how skilled the crew is, and no matter how advanced the submarine, there are still times when they don't make it back, because the sea is unforgiving. When a submarine is lost in the deep parts of the ocean, sometimes it's very hard to find. There's no light, it's extremely deep, it's vast, and the wreckage could be scattered on the ocean floor like tiny pieces in a vast world. One of the most well-known examples is the American submarine USS Scorpion. According to U.S. Navy records, it went missing on May 22, 1968, while returning from deployment. There were 99 crew members on board. It did not reach Norfolk, Virginia. A large search operation began, but it took several months before its wreckage was found at the bottom, deep in the Atlantic Ocean, near the Azores, at a depth of approximately 10,000 feet. Until now, the real reason for its disappearance is still being discussed. There is an official explanation that involves a torpedo malfunction, but there are other theories that have not been proven. What is clear is that the 99 people on board never made it home. In the same year, the Soviet submarine K-129 also disappeared in the Pacific Ocean. According to declassified reports, this led to one of the CIA's most secretive and ambitious operations during the Cold War. It was called Project Azorian. The CIA built a large salvage ship that looked like it was meant for mining at sea, but its real mission was to try to lift part of the sunken Soviet submarine from the extreme depths of the Pacific. According to declassified CIA materials, only part of the submarine was recovered, and many details still haven't been fully released to the public. This shows how important submarines were during the Cold War. Even if the vessel sank, the secrets it carried were still valuable. And on August 12, 2000, another submarine disaster shocked the world. The Russian submarine Kursk sank in the Barents Sea while on a military exercise. According to the official Russian inquiry mentioned in many reports, it is believed that it started with a torpedo explosion inside the submarine. All 118 crew members perished. Even more painful, there were reports that some crew members may have initially survived the first explosion, but they were not rescued in time. Because of this, the world saw even more how difficult submarine rescue is. When something bad happens under the sea, it's not enough to just know where the submarine is. You also need to get there quickly. You need to open the hatch. You have to fight against the pressure, the cold, the darkness, and time. And often, time is the biggest enemy. This is the harsh reality. In the life of submariners, when a soldier is on land, there's a chance he can be found. When a pilot crashes, there's a chance he can be rescued. But when a submarine is lost under the sea, sometimes there's no body, no wreckage, and no clear answers to give the family. That's why every submarine patrol comes with a silent danger, not just because of the enemy, but because of the very place where they work. A dark, cold, and extremely deep world, where if something goes wrong, sometimes the sea itself hides the whole story. This